Okay, couple of minutes over, but just about on time. So, see how this goes. Okay, hopefully this one isn't going to be dead air. Dead air, I think is the expression. Whatever. There we go. Hey, Toxic, welcome. Looks like I won't need this after all. How are you today? I'm hoping there'll be a few more people in this live stream because I have given advance notice, rather. Had a few posts advertising this, so that's good. Good to hear. Personally, I've been a little stressed because I wanted to do. I want to write a letter, but my Word pad on my laptop seems to have expired. I'm trying to find some way around that, so I was a little stressed out about that, in all honesty. But otherwise, I'm okay. Can't complain too much, anyway. You know, when we say we can't complain, I think a good expression should be we can't complain too much. Would make more sense. Okay, we've got a few people here. Let's say Owen, welcome. 2016 Clinical, welcome. Thank you, Owen. I'm not too bad. Hope you're okay yourself. And welcome to the live stream. I think this is your first live stream, so welcome. 2016, welcome to you as well. So that's 3 people already. That's good. It's always hard to tell with these things, but I did give advance notice, so hopefully it will get a bit of traction. Just to give you guys a sort of heads up, I'm expecting this to be around about 1 hour. So may go a bit over that, but we'll see. Good to be here just in time. My keyboard broke down out of nowhere, so I'm on my tablet instead. Have you had problems with your keypad sticking, Toxic? Because that's an issue I sometimes... I mean, to be fair, this is a second-hand laptop, so sometimes it sticks. And that's frustrating, but I got it for a good price. And the one advantage with this laptop is it's got a lot of space on it, which my other one didn't. So, talking of new things, I've got a new heater today. It's better than the old one, so that's something. Just kick the bucket. Yeah, I actually got a new keyboard, like a physical plug-in keyboard, a while back because I was having similar issues. So I can definitely relate to that. So 2016, I think you may have been before. Oh, and you're new to my live streams. So the way I usually do these is basically it could be absolutely any topic, just anything in the news, anything on my channel, anything people want to bring up. We can discuss, debate, and that's basically how I approach it. It's really an opportunity for subscribers to engage with myself, to ask questions, to engage with each other. That's how I approach it, because I can't always get back to comments. So that's it. Raya Rocket, Free. Hi, Nathan. You talked about the two Birmingham girls who attacked a man and woman. You wouldn't think women would behave like this. It's usually men. Um, yeah, indeed. That case was pretty awful. Although I'm not, I don't. In the 21st century, I've seen plenty of women behave obnoxiously as well. I mean, a drunk woman could be just as nightmarish as a drunk man. So it's for me that isn't overly surprising. Probably overall, the chances of a violent offender is more likely to be male overall, but that's not universal. Do you tend to invite people onto the stream directly? Be great to chat with you. To answer that question, no, basically it's just open for anyone. I mean, at the moment I've got about 2,000, coming up to 2,700 subscribers. So really, it's anyone who's around. And the approach I take is, like I say, I think it's a way to engage more with people because I can't guarantee that I get back to every comment. I know we've had a little back and forth with disagreements. So, this is an example. We've had differences. You're here and you're very welcome to have your voice. And that's just the way I approach it. I just find it, maybe I'm just lazy, maybe I don't like typing a lot, but this way is kind of easier than responding at length to comments. TJR 7972. That's another thing I do. I try to read out each comment on the live stream so that people feel that they're having a voice. And I think there's a 10-second lapse or something. I don't. We've got 8 people at the moment. Goodness, if this gets too crowded, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Alex, I mean, it's good to have more people than less people. Okay, so let's break this down a bit. Hi Nathan, what do you think of the Super Bowl halftime controversy with Bad Bunny singing in Spanish? I got a little glimpse of that news, but I didn't follow it closely because the thing with news. I'll say this, guys. There's always something going on. Honestly, I don't know enough about that to really comment in detail. Bad Bunny is a musician, I believe. I know he's been in WWE a few times. He's Puerto Rican, I think. But honestly, I don't know much about it. Maybe you can tell us more about that, TJR. I would say a significant proportion of American citizens speak Spanish. So, especially in California, Texas, and other border states. So if he was singing in Spanish, was it the national anthem or I don't know. Alex Young, 6533. Hi to yourself. Welcome. Do you think Andrew is going to be arrested? Hi, Clara. Welcome to you too. Do I think Andrew is going to be arrested? I don't know. It would be certainly kind of a historic event. I'm trying to remember the last time a member of the royal family was arrested. I know back in the 90s, Princess Anne, her dogs bit someone and she actually got a fine, but that's obviously on a different scale. I do think we're in a situation. I was going to make a video specifically on this. In fact, I've got this beside me. Sun, Princess of Darkness. We've got Mandelson and Andrew there. I'm not a fan of the Sun, but I tend to buy different papers for coverage of different things. Okay, so do I think he's going to be arrested? I think we're at a point where if there isn't some sort of legal consequences for Andrew, given how deeply he's involved in this thing, it will smack of elitism. I'm a moderate monarchist, but I can see why it would breed anger if it was perceived to be Andrew getting away with it. So, do I think he's going to be arrested? I don't know. I think it's more likely Mandelson will be arrested. But the pair of them are really exemplifying this sort of elitist corruption. So it's that's one to watch. I'll be making a video specifically on that, so stay tuned. Okay, what are your thoughts on the 2020s in comparison to the 2010s? Interesting question. Well, I mean, how do you summarize a whole decade? We tend to look at it in terms of geopolitics, in terms of culture. I'd make this comparison. Some of the things that were going on in, say, the late 1970s carried on to the 1980s, in the late 80s, into the early 90s, and so on. So some of the things that were going on socio-politically and in terms of culture in the late 2010s have carried on into this decade. But how do we define decades? So 2010s, I think, I'm a political person, I think, in that sense. if we look at the 2010s, we think of the Arab Spring. That's the thing that comes in my mind. Also, WikiLeaks, the culture wars. 2020s, the culture wars continue. The rise of Trump in the 2010s, Brexit. These are geopolitical things that have incited a lot of debate. But 2020s, of course, the pandemic was a hugely defining thing of this decade. Um, but and the invasion of Ukraine, I would say, are probably the two predominant events of the 2020s so far. But there's other big things going on. Okay, guys, there's a lot of guys and girls, I should say. There's a lot of comments coming through, so I'll try and get through to everyone. Okay, as far as you might know, Nathan, how much do you know about the Fabian Society? Contrary to what others say, they're left wing. I find that their modus operandi contradictory. Okay, I know this is a big thing for you, Toxic. I know a little bit about them insofar as they were traditionally a socialist think tank of sorts. I'm not sure that I agree they have massive influence. I mean, the thing is, their influence on the Labour Party is comparable to, say, the Henry Jackson Society on the Tories or the 1922 Committee. It shouldn't be that surprising that a political party has ideological think tanks behind it. So I know for you this is a big issue, and I'm not disputing that, but I'm not sure that they're quite as influential as you may feel. I mean, I would say the overall political direction in this country has swung more to the right in recent years. So that would put question marks on how much influence the Fabian Society actually has. I mean, Starmer's government is not particularly right wing, particularly left wing. So how much influence do they really have? Okay, Ryo Rocket 1803. When you said in one video you was punching and unprovoked, did the guy get arrested in the end, and did the member of public intervene? Okay, I may have been referring to my own experience of crime. I think what happened was the police gave me information, like if I saw the guy who done this, to call them. I think they gave me some sort of emergency number. I can't remember, in all honesty, if he was actually specifically arrested for what would have been common assault. But of course, it was shocking. I was minding my own business, walked past, and suddenly punched. Right? He didn't. It wasn't permanent damage. He didn't break my jaw or my nose or anything, but it hurt, and it was shocking. It's just the shock of it. You don't expect a total stranger to just randomly attack you, and he didn't steal anything. It wasn't like a mugging. It was just the police put it wrong place, wrong time. But I can't recall if he was arrested or not. I do know that the police said if I saw him to get in touch with them. Evening, Wales Dav 2025. Welcome to the live stream. Ryo Rocket 1803. Let's see. Because members of the public usually intervene or inform police when someone is attacked. We'd like to think so. It's not always the case. In that incident, it was in a sort of housing estate, so it wasn't like in the city centre. And I think we were the only ones around, like me and the guy who attacked me. So there weren't really any other witnesses. Obviously, I was very upset. I came back and told my father, and of course, he was angry. He called the police, and there was the whole thing. But I can't honestly remember if he actually was arrested or not. I do remember, I will say this. Since that time, and we're talking now early 2000s, we're talking over 20 years ago, I have kind of pushed myself to actually go into that area, and it has actually gradually improved. There's been some investment in the area. So it's still not a particularly safe area. I mean, it's not somewhere you'd sort of, you still need to be a bit assertive there, but I thought, okay, I'm going to just challenge myself. I'll just go through here as a shortcut to get to actually the tall ships were in Sunderland, and I went through the area to get to that. Nothing happened, but of course there were memories there, not pleasant memories. So it was a strange experience. And late stage capitalism really for both decades. Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's I'd agree, but there's also been significant ruptures in terms of social opinion. I mean, if we look at, for example, the Generation Z protests around the world, that's specifically about corruption in countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. But we've seen equivalents in Western countries like the the Yellow Vest protests in France. We always see May Day protests around, anti-capitalism protests. But I think it's fair to say that pretty much most Western governments are either centrist or right wing. There's a few exceptions, like the centre left government of Pedro Sanchez in Spain. There's a couple of others, and Petro in Colombia. But I think the overall trajectory has been more to the right. Even traditionally left wing parties like Labour, if we look at Starmer's government, there's been pandering to the right. But late stage capitalism, I think that's a fair analysis. We live in a globalized world, and the tens and the twenties has been about that. But I also think with significant public ruptures. I mean, Brexit certainly wasn't an anti-capitalist movement, but it's a sort of thing that demonstrates anger at perceived institutional detachment. It's not something I agree with. I voted Remain, but we can't dismiss how these things have developed. We can't dismiss, for example, the rise of Trump, and that is more than just capitalism. That's getting into something else. Okay, let's see. Because I feel like ever since the 2020 year, we feel less lively and connected due to lockdown, politically divided, and over reliance on technology. I'd agree with you, Alex. I don't think we can underestimate the impact COVID had on the world. I would say a bigger global impact than 9/11, a bigger global impact than Arab Spring. It was profound. One of the deadliest pandemics ever, but also in terms of its global disruption. There's another thing to consider. We have the biggest population, world population than ever before, about 8.2 billion people compared to, I mean, within my lifetime, I was born in 1985. The global population then, I think, was about 4.6, 4.7 billion. It's now 8.2 billion, almost double that. Um, that's that's an issue, but we also look at, as you say, over reliance on technology. Um, is there a breakdown in human communication in the 2020s? I wonder about that. I'm not sure. I think there is actually a desire to get back to basics in a sense. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. I'm someone who's talking into a video. There's people around the country, around the world, talking to me. This would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. It's a very good thing, actually. So I don't say technology is all bad, but I do think over reliance on technology we have to be wary about. Um, would you get your hair done at an all British hairdresser called Yobs or Us? Interesting question. No comment. Actually, with the pandemic, my friend done my hair. That's because it's my hairdresser's good actually, but he's had competition recently from Turkish barbers. Uh, he's a good guy, but he struggles. I like his place. He has lots of retro posters around and so on. Okay, guys, I'm going to try and get to each comment, but this live stream's moving quite fast, so please excuse me if I miss your comment. I will say, though, Nathan, to be fair, that while governments are accountable, it can be pointed out that they are not accountable to the public next to the judges in the country. That's scary. Well, I've always argued politicians are more accountable than judges because at least with politicians, we can vote them out. In the UK, we can't do that with judges. It's pretty much impossible in this country to hold a judge to account, or very, very difficult. The only way to do it is for professional misconduct or to contact the Attorney General of England and Wales, who then can refer a case for undue leniency. But in terms of judges themselves, I think that they are detached. I believe that. Politicians, people get very, very strong views on them, but ultimately we do have a voice in voting them out. And if they're unpopular enough, they will leave office. So I think it's different in that sense. But I do agree, though, that with frustration that you may feel toxic because people often feel governments don't do what they promise to do. And, we've seen this with Labour. Millions of people voted for Labour, and I don't think they feel they've got the centre-left government that they would have thought they were getting with voting for Labour. You're quite right. They're largely right-wing, centre-right, and have been dragged further right in recent years. Yeah, and the thing is, so when you might be surprised to hear me say this, given my very, very conservative views on crime, But if I'd voted Labour, I'd be frustrated. I'd be thinking, I did not vote Labour to pander to reform votes. Because the thing is, it's not actually working anyway. It doesn't matter what Starmer does. He could talk about being tough on the votes and all the rest of it. A lot of reform voters, to put it plainly, hate him and they hate his government. It doesn't matter what he does. They've already convinced themselves that they're going to vote reform, and that's so. Rather than constantly pandering to get right wing votes, I think Starmer should focus on trying to rebuild left wing votes, because they're going to go to the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and perhaps the SNP in Scotland. Um, I mean, there's things like certainly the rhetoric around immigration, but also welfare, and I don't like it. That's perhaps the more centre left side of me. I don't like the scapegoating of migrants and the unemployed. Raya Rock 1803. How come judges give lesser sentence when there's assault? Judges in the UK should give longer sentences. Well, you won't be surprised to hear I totally agree with that. Um, I can't comprehend how violent assault is dealt with suspended sentences. It just I think that's a disgrace. I can see some sense in suspended sentences for cases where people have a chance of rehabilitation, but I think a society, an organized society, has to say if you violently assault a stranger, it's unacceptable. And a suspended sentence is, there is conditions attached, which means that if they violate that, they can be recalled. But yeah, I do agree with you, Raya Rock, on that one. Absolutely. Do you think Brexit will be reversed in your lifetime? And how much are you willing to give up for it, such as the pound for the euro, to say? Well, I don't actually think going back into the European Union means we'd have to give up the pound for the euro, because remember, it was when we were in the European Union that we maintained the pound. I think it was under the Blair government we rejected the euro, but we were still in the European Union. I made a video recently where I argued that may be inevitable. I used the may word. I didn't say it was definitely inevitable, but I said it may be inevitable that we rejoin the European Union. My rationale for that is I feel that a lot of people who voted Brexit, some of them will have changed their mind. Some of them will have passed away. And I'm not saying that in a flippant way. It's just a fact that older people voted Brexit. If a poll were done tomorrow, I think a majority would either regret their decision or vote to go back into the European Union. But, even as someone who believes in the European Union, I don't believe in a European superstate. I do believe in sovereignty. How much would we be willing to sacrifice? Well, I don't actually think that much would be required. Obviously, if we rejoin the European Union, we can't treat it like a country club. We'd have to abide by certain rules, as would be the case in any international membership. But yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's possible, but it won't happen next year. It won't happen 5 years from now. I can see it being conceivable within a decade. At the moment, I don't think there's a political willpower. I do give Starmer credit for his reset with the European Union. I think that's been very important, but I don't think we'll rejoin the European Union anytime soon, because I just don't think there's a political willpower at the moment. The Liberal Democrats are pushing it, but they're not going to be in power. So that's that. Endgame for Trump. One would hope so. But to put it simply, this is a man who's already been impeached twice. He is a convicted felon. He's still in power. I think actually America is a more corrupt country than the UK, because, we talk a lot about the Epstein stuff, and Mandelson's contemptible. So is Andrew. But Starmer is facing the potential loss of his government simply for appointing Mandelson. In the United States, Trump has been named more than almost anyone in the Epstein files. He is the head of state. So it just shows the contrast there. Starmer has no personal connection to Epstein. There's no evidence that Starmer ever met Epstein, yet he could lose his premiership as a result of this. Perhaps deservedly so, but there is a contrast there. Endgame for Trump, I hope so, but unfortunately, I don't think it's the case. Interestingly, with the faith in democracy in recent years reached an all-time low in terms of figures and percentages. Is that correct? I think, to be honest, in democracies, there's always disillusion. We could go back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You'll see people complaining about politics. I do think it's quite low at the moment. I do think this is a particularly difficult time. Um, but I'm not sure that it's significantly high enough to completely dismantle democracy. I don't see that happening. I can see disorder. I can see some disruption, and we see this happening sometimes as a result of disinformation, sometimes as a result of genuine frustration, or overlap with the two. Um, but I don't see a collapse of democracy. How do you think adults should respond to name calling from young people? A guy in a place I grew up used to react badly to being called ogre. Interesting. The teenagers were significantly younger than him, but used to go ballistic. It seemed his reactions just attracted more bullying. That sounds like a rough thing. It sounds, I mean, without knowing the case, it sounds like he was being tormented by young offenders. And this is why I have very little patience with people who argue leniency for young offenders, because they don't understand what that's like. I have experienced that personally. It has a very, very corrosive effect on life quality. To answer your question, Wales, I think anyone losing their temper is understandable when you're being harassed constantly. And I think too many young offenders believe themselves that their age protects them, and there's just not significant deterrent. So they get fueled by it. They keep doing it. Obviously, if they think there's no consequences, they're going to keep doing it. Toxic. Moist Critical has very long hair and kept it. Out of curiosity, how do you view those who oppose both democracy and autocracy simultaneously? What are your thoughts on militant centrists? I know you're a centrist, but there's other types too. Well, the thing is, Toxic, I think you proposed this, opposing democracy and autocracy. I've been upfront with you. I understand your frustrations with democracy. I really do. I just don't see an alternative system being able to be sold to the public. I said this to you before. With respect, a lot of what you argue has merit, but for a political system to change, you need to sell the idea to the public. And if the public can't see it happening, if they can't envisage it, I just don't see how it would work. I mean, what is the opposite of democracy if not autocracy? Democracies, incidentally, democracies take different forms. We have republics, we have what we have in this country, a parliamentary constitutional democracy. So you get different forms of democracy as well. I just think that if you're proposing an alternative, no matter how good it may be in an ideological sense, if it can't be sold to the public as an idea, and that means simplifying it, um, you know, then I can't see it happening, in all honesty. Custard or rice pudding? Oh, I like both actually. Anyone else want to answer that question? Given a choice, I'll go for rice pudding because custard can congeal in a way that rice pudding doesn't. Land the UK. Okay, Owen, I think you may have, that may be, I'm just going to scroll back because I think that may be a second part of your comment. Land the UK. You're quite right. They're largely right wing, centre right, and have been dragged further right in the recent years. Sorry, Owen, I think that your comment may be detached. So you've just written land the UK. I don't know if that's part of another comment. That's one thing with live stream people. Sometimes comments get a bit detached. Let's see. Just common sense, Media 89. Good evening to yourself. Clara, your insight for the UK local elections for 2026. Good question. I may be abroad at that time, actually, but my thoughts on that is, unfortunately, I think reform will make inroads, and I think that will make inroads in my city. I live in Sunderland. This is one of the red wall seats. Now, we are still Labour, but there is a lot of people in this city that support reform. So, unfortunately, I do think they'll make inroads. I say unfortunately for the reasons I've stated before. I do not trust reform. Um, but I also say that local elections can be indicative of protests rather than an indication of how a general election will go. So even if reform does well in these local elections, and they probably will, it doesn't mean that they're going to win the next general election. So that's a good question. Hi Nathan, did you see the documentary of Michael Jackson on Channel 4? No, I didn't see that one. What was it, New Revelations, or was it just about his life? I know there's a biopic film coming up this year about Michael Jackson, which I do intend to see. I'll be honest, I like Michael Jackson as an artist. I like the guy's music. I mean, I've got Thriller, I've got Bad. So I like Michael Jackson as an artist. The allegations around him, I've got very mixed views on, in all honesty. But I don't know if the documentary's New Revelations or what. Toxic custard with apple crumble. And what are your thoughts on militant centrists? Can you give me an example? Because I'm not really sure what you mean by that. I'm not. I mean, when you say militant centrist, you mean dogmatic or literally militant, as in taking up arms? I know you're a centrist, but there's other types too. Um, yeah, if you could just give an example of that, maybe. You ever play video games? Not really. Years ago, there was a game called Abe's Odyssey, which I enjoyed. I don't know if you recall that. I mean, we're going back to about 1998. It was actually quite developed for the time. It was about a little alien escaping from a factory. It was a very addictive game. I think I also played Soul Calibur for a while, Medal of Honor a little bit, but it was always on my brother's PlayStation. I never had one of my own. I played Diamond Dash. I played for a while on my smartphone, the zombie game. It was very addictive. Kind of, you could choose characters and fight zombies, but then that smartphone kind of crashed. So that was that. Okay, hi. That's why I wanted to chat with you in the live stream more directly at some point. Okay. Well, you're welcome, Owen. I do apologize. It's the comment format isn't ideal as opposed to having a direct debate. I appreciate you inviting me to do this, having the direct debate. Honestly, I hope you got my message before, and I will use this opportunity to say to you, since you're listening, I'm sorry if I am a bit blunt with you sometimes, but the subjects I've been talking about are raw for me, and it's my conviction. I will be strong willed when it comes to points of conviction, but I try to differentiate between people and their ideology as much as possible. Um, but to be honest, I don't know if you got my message about that, but I'm not quite ready for that. Um, I also think in order to have a debate, there needs to be some sort of halfway point, and I do think we have very, very, very different views on that subject. So my question would be, do we have a halfway point? Because for me it would be okay, I can accept the point of rehabilitation, restorative justice and all that sort of thing, but I'd like to see some sort of sign, for instance, that you accept the need for judicial punishment. With that, maybe it's something I could consider in the future, but for now, it's also from a practical point of view, I'm not quite sure how it works. Like, which channel is it held on, which platform is it held on, how to do the split screen. Just from a technical point of view, I'm not quite sure how it works. So anyway, just for the record, Owen, I'm not totally ruling it out, okay? But at this point, there's a lot of other things going on in my life. I hope you can understand. I'm just not ready for it at this exact point, but I won't rule it out in the future. That's what I'll give you for now. I won't rule it out in the future. Just common sense. I like watching your videos because even though I'm a member, I like listening to others' opinions and something I agree with. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the support. Reform. Yeah, I think you are one of my reform voting subscribers. But I've always said I don't trust reform. I don't like reform, but I've always been careful not to attack every single person who endorses reform. I'll be honest, there's a lot of reform voters I don't want to, but you are an example of I've seen your comments. I know you're a decent person. And I think there are reform voters who have very legitimate concerns. Absolutely. Let's see. Right, Rock. Hi Nathan, what do you think of Family Guy? They did stereotypes of Irish. I'll be honest, I quite like Family Guy, but not all of the material. The thing with Family Guy, for others watching, that's an American cartoon, adult cartoon. They have some funny skits. I like some of the storylines with Brian and Stewie, for example. And there is quite a lot of funny satire there, but I also think they don't know when to end a joke. And I don't really like the ad hominem attacks on celebrities. I think sometimes it can be a bit lazy. I also think sometimes it's been in bad taste with some of the things I've covered. So, scale of 1 to 10, I give Family Guy a strong 5 to 6. But in terms of like mocking the Irish, they mock everyone. So I don't think people should be too offended by that because it's the ad hominem attacks on individuals I would say is more insulting than generic attacks or generic stereotypes about nationalities because Family Guy targets literally everyone, including Americans. Okay, no worries about that. I never take things you say as any sort of slight or insult. Fair play to you for that. I appreciate that you take the time to write out a comment. I understand that you don't want to do it at the moment. Well, thank you for your understanding. You'll know, Owen, I do have very strong views on this subject, and I guess it's also a case of because I know I have strong views, I don't want to be too sharp in differing with someone to the point where it feels like I'm attacking them personally, whilst I do want to stand up for my conviction and be very candid where I disagree. And that might be a strong disagreement. So I appreciate your understanding on that, but you're very welcome to come to live streams. We can even debate that subject on live stream, but just in terms of the format that you suggested, yeah, just not yet, but possibly in the future. Militant centrists tend to be very combative against sovereign popularity, which could give a hint about sovereign popularity. It should be fair, popularity has no moral boundaries. Militant centrists tend to be very combative against sovereign popularity. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Toxic. Sovereign popularity, you're talking about sovereignty in a nation state? Or are we talking about, like, we hear of sovereign citizens in the United States? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Family Guy post season 7 is trash and the good episode of Fear. Yeah, I know people who follow Family Guy for years have said there has been a decline in some of the output. My issue with Family Guy, well, for one thing, they don't know when to end a joke. It's like they make a joke and it's kind of like repetitive and you kind of get the point and then they don't know when to end it. Okay, let me take a drink. Let's see. Olympic mug. We have the Milan Winter Olympics, so topical. Do you think finding alien life would unite all the countries in the world? Like, not saying they attacked us, but if we saw alien life, do you think we'd sort our affairs? That's a very good question. Well, I don't know if you've seen the film Arrival with Amy Adams. They have an interesting concept. The good thing about that movie is it's done in quite a serious way. It's not like Independence Day or what would be considered a normal alien invasion movie. It's quite a cerebral movie. It's basically she's a linguist, I believe, and the aliens sort of come in these long, elongated pod things all over the world. Now, the interesting thing in that movie, spoiler here, so stop listening if maybe I shouldn't say the plot, but let's just say there's a plot in that movie involving a Chinese general. So it's just reminding me of what you've said there. But it's a very good movie, Arrival with Amy Adams, 2016, I think it was made. And it's a unique film. It's not really comparable to anything else, but gets a lot into what you've brought up there. Just common sense. The thing is with Reform UK, there are things I feel uncomfortable with, to be honest, and I do think we have work on things to do, but I feel we have good policies. Well, being very conservative on crime, it's one thing I hope that they do, but even there, I just don't know how they can deliver. I mean, Farage says they're going to be the toughest party ever on Law and Order. It'd be good to see, but saying that and actually delivering it is another matter. So, but yeah, I do feel concerned about certainly their links to Russia and their pandering to Trump. I also feel with Reform, they're not projecting a particularly positive image. It's all fine to criticize the government. That's what all opposition parties do, but you have to offer an alternative. And the thing about Reform, their message to me seems to be Britain is broken. We're the answer, but they're not really giving any positive message. It's all negativity. Migrants are invading the country, etc., etc. I just don't find their message inspiring. And to vote for a party, I need to be inspired. I saw it more being a conversation than the debate anyway, and I wasn't too fussed with the exact topic. Happy to wait if you aren't willing to talk criminology. Well, this is the thing, when we may have common ground in other areas. If we could perhaps talk on other subjects, I'd maybe be open to that. But again, it's not just about that. It's also a practical thing. I'm not quite sure how to do it. Like I assume it would be a split screen, or like from a practical point of view. Even though I've been YouTubing now for YouTubing for over a decade, I've always just uploaded videos. I've never actually done it before. So from a practical point of view, I'm not sure how it works. I think there's an option saying, um, what is it, collaborator or something like that. I'm just not sure how it works practically. But like I say, it's something I'd be open to in the possibly near future. We'd obviously agree a time and a date and so on. We'd have to have some sort of format. What's the subject? Are we just chatting? Are we asking questions? To be fair, I did check out your channel and I checked out some of the content with others on various subjects. So it's not something I'm ruling out. I'd like to be open to that in the future, but it would be the future as opposed to any time soon. But yeah. Hi Declan, welcome. I think we need to do a bit more to foster cooperation between people across systems if we want a united planet dealing with extraterrestrial life at the moment. I agree, Owen, actually, with that. I mean, how can we cooperate with alien life when we have 54 armed conflicts going on in the world? I often think, the thing about terraforming other planets, we've made a pretty good mess of this planet as human beings. So we'd have to, it's almost arrogant to think let's just go somewhere else. I think we need to really improve life on Earth before we even think about that. Thoughts on David Starkey? He's been someone I've been checking out recently, even though I disagree with him on some things. I have a book by Starkey, actually. I'll just show you guys since you brought that up. Let's see here. Where is it? Henry VIII and his Six Wives. I assume you mean the historian David Starkey. Can't think of another David Starkey. Yeah, let's see. Clinical. So there we go. Henry VIII and the Six Wives. My sister's a big fan of Richard III, and I know she doesn't like Starkey. She finds him quite arrogant in the way he projects himself. I think he's a little bit blowhard with some of his right wing viewpoints, and he's been in hot water over the years with some racial statements. But I think he knows his stuff. I do think, I mean, if you want a Tudor historian, you go to David Starkey. So I think he knows his stuff, but there's a certain arrogance there. Yeah, but he hasn't really been on my radar for a while, and I'm reading a lot of books at the moment, so I haven't actually read that one for a while. It's well written though. It's about the Six Wives, but it focuses, if you're interested in history, about half the book is Catherine of Aragon because she was Henry's consort for so long. So he's done it in actually that chronological order. I think he can be a bit dogmatic in the way he projects himself sometimes. Let's see. Okay, we've got quite a few running up here. Okay, sorry, people. I'm just going to try and cover. Have you ever heard of Jim Dawson? I haven't, no. London 2012 Happier Times. I do agree with you there, Owen. I remember that was a particularly optimistic year. We had the Diamond Jubilee. We had a genuine sense of good feeling with London 2012. I remember going into Starbucks in my city at that time, and people were talking about it. Baristas, customers. It was just it felt, 2012 for me personally. I had some personal issues going on that year that weren't ideal, but without wanting to sound biased, I do think we had one of the best opening ceremonies. London 2012, it was fantastic the way they done the Industrial Revolution. Danny Boyle was a great director. He was a good choice. And yeah, I did feel patriotic pride at the time. It's fair to say this country's an Olympic superpower. We don't do so well in the Winter Olympics, the Summer Games. From Beijing onwards, this country has just been soaring ahead. And overall, I don't know if people realize this, but we rank third or fourth in overall medal tables. Now, it's not everything, obviously. It's about individual athletes' performance. It's about individual achievements, sometimes athletes overcoming personal adversity and so on. But still, I won't deny it's a source of pride that we are such an Olympic superpower. I think we could justifiably be proud of that. Hi, Nathan. There was an interview, Kate Galloway interviewing Jeremy Kyle, and Kyle was saying of Steve Diamond's death was because of COVID. What a shit. Kyle is like a lot of bullies. He can give, but he can't take. He just won't take any responsibility for that. Now, technically, he didn't directly kill Mr. Diamond, but I find it very hard to believe that there's absolutely no connect between a man being smeared on national television through that lie detector test and then, we know what happened. So for Kyle to deny any responsibility is absolute cowardice. What movies did I watch today? Well, Clara, I didn't watch any movies today. I actually watched some of the Olympics with my mum. The Milan Winter Olympics. We watched the women's downhill skiing and the women's luge. Yeah. So no movies today, but last night I watched something called Awake. It was about insomnia. It was okay, but it was a bit disjointed on Netflix. But I think Jeremy Kyle is pushing the narrative to me. Um, well, I've made no secret of my contempt for Kyle. I mean, my big issue with someone like him is he plays judge, jury, and executioner, but doesn't take responsibility himself. And here's the thing: he will say, "Oh, look at this terrible person who's stealing benefit money," but he actually paid people to appear on his show. So there's an irony about that. He paid them to appear on his show, so he was using them. I hear Kyle's advising reform. If that's true, it does not surprise me at all. Okay. I will be honest, I'm not a big fan of Trump myself. I was many years ago. When it comes to Russia, I can only talk about my group in Norwich. We all talk something about supporting Ukraine. Well, that's good to hear, just common sense. I'm very closely linked to the Ukrainian community here. Um, let's see, the bare minimum is independent parallel. Oh, sorry, toxic. I'll move on to that in a second. Yeah, just common sense. I'm sure there are reform voters who have their heart in the right place. But I would suggest look at the direction of the party, look at Farage's statements over the years, look at the sort of people that is attracting reform. I reiterate that Matt Goodwin's comments, the candidate in Manchester, that people who are from an ethnic minority aren't necessarily British. It's divisive and it's polarizing and it just others people. I just think that sort of thing is frankly toxic. So it's things like that I have a big problem with on reform. But I can accept there's individuals who, like yourself. But I will be honest, I find it hard. You come across as a decent, open-minded person, so I struggle to see what you see in reform. But it's your right, of course. Let's see. Okay, the bare minimum is it? Okay, let's see. We've got a lot of comments coming through. The bare minimum. Let's see. Sorry. I'm trying not to miss any comments. The bare minimum is independent parallel governments within democratic contexts, which in basic terms tackles and counters the main government in power if they ever go rogue and deliver for the. It sounds like you almost mean an advisory, well, not an advisory government, but like a government watchdog that's a mini government in itself. Okay, but who puts them in power? This is where it gets complicated. Who puts them in power, if not the people? And if it is the people, then we vote for them, right? So it's like a mini government in areas where the main government cannot bring themselves to do or even fail to do. Well, some would argue that's what the House of Lords does. It's an advisory chamber. Parliamentarians push through bills, and then the second reading goes to the House of Lords. A lot of people want to abolish the House of Lords. I can understand that. But proponents of the House of Lords would say, well, they hold the government to account. I'm not sure that they do actually, but what you're talking about with parallel government, how is it put into power? Do the people vote for it? I mean, is that a party political government? So, for example, let's say we have a Labour government. Would the parallel government you're talking about, would it therefore also be Labour? Would it be from another party? Would it be not politically party inspired? Would it be, judges? What would it be made up of? Would it be politicians? So I wonder about that. Yeah, split screen is quite easy to do. You just use a program like StreamYard. It's free and it streams both our video feeds into one of our channels. Look forward to thinking about this in the future. I would say this, so, and if we done it, I'd like to have a trial run, maybe on a private capacity, just from the technical point of view before we got into like like a more formal conversation, just because from the technical point of view, I'd be fiddling around trying to get it right or whatever. So maybe like a trial run first might be an option. Declan, how are you? I'm hoping not starting a cold. Got scratchy throat, going to take some uh, echinacea tomorrow. Not sure what that is. 2012 was a hopeful year minus the washout summer. Um, and the other thing with 2012, the world didn't end. Don't know if you guys remember the whole Mayan prophecies thing that never came to fruition. 2012 inspired me to start running and playing sports. A bit corny, but a visible public sports is so important and could do great things. Well, that's one of the great things with the Olympics. So, and even if someone's not going to be an Olympian, it can inspire. And we are quite a sports loving country generally, even outside the Olympics. A lot of sports have their origins in Britain. But yeah, actually, 2012 inspired me as well. I wouldn't say I'm the fittest person in the world, but I walk a lot. I try to have a balanced diet. I exercise quite regularly. So um, yeah, 2012 definitely had that effect. Let's see, Wales. If you want me to summarize it, let me know. Okay. Toxic. And what did I find terrifying is that digital ID does also extend to schools and patient data, and leaks have been happening far too often. That's why I view the Labour Party differently. People can. To be honest, for me, I'm trying to make the best of a bad situation. As a working class person, it's the only part of giving people like me a chance to stand and play a part from a right wing perspective. So I suppose your argument would be that Labour doesn't do that. Um, it's a fair point that reform perhaps provides a voice for working class right leaning voters. But remember also, reform is made up of millionaires. So with respect, I would just be cautious about putting too much hope in the leadership of reform, because they present themselves as an anti-establishment party. But look what's happening. They're attracting ex-Tories. They literally are the establishment. So, some of the rhetoric may be appealing to people, particularly in terms of bringing down immigration and so on. But I just think that a lot of people are going to be disappointed when they get into power. I think we have to accept that no political party will ever be able to deliver everything that they say they will. And I think politicians have to be upfront about that. One of the things that where I don't trust reform is they're promising the earth. They're still a small party, and Farage very much acts like a protest politician. Like this government's terrible, Britain's broken, vote for us. But they have to be realistic as to what they will actually be able to do when in power. Hi Nathan, would do edit videos on your channels when do a subject you talk about? So I'm not sure what you mean by that, right, Earl? Do you think we will ever get another president like Trump again? God, I hope not. I hope not. I will say if Vance runs, he's like a mini Trump, and he's very much Trumpian. Um, I actually feel some concern about Vance because he's young, so ostensibly he could do 8 years. The only thing is he doesn't have the same cult following, and he is deeply unpopular. So Trump's 79 years old, and sometimes it shows. So hopefully this will be a kind of fluke of history. I really, really hope so. I hope one day American politics will get back to semi-normality. To get presidents like, you know, are semi. I mean, there's no such thing really as a normal American president because of the potential of that office and the implications of that office. But I think Trump is uniquely bad, and I think he has hugely eroded American credibility. So I really do hope so. I will say though, in the 70s there was a fallout from Watergate, and at that time, a lot of people would have thought politics is rotten. Whenever it's changed forever, and yet there was kind of semi-normality in politics afterwards. I would cite the 1996 presidential election between Clinton and Dole. It was quite respectful. It was a relatively normal election cycle, comparatively speaking. In other words, politics did kind of return to normal after Watergate. But I think Trumpism has had a far deeper impact even than Watergate. I guess independent politicians, if anything, so long as they have a lot of wisdom, expertise, and virtue, and by nature they can be self trained and well educated, of course. But you can see what's going to happen there, right? What we've seen with protests in recent years is a mistrust of professionals. And I'm not saying that's justified, but if you get intelligent, educated professionals forming an alternative government, I can already hear the chorus of saying they're elites, they're elites. So it would almost have the counter effect of what you're arguing. Don't you think if you have an alternative government made up of educated professionals, people will just say they're an elite? I can see that being the case. Why does God hide from us? Interesting question. I know and I agree. I'm not happy with the ex Tories joining. Trial sounds absolutely fine and fair. Glad you also like Olympic action. Absolutely, Owen. What sport do you follow, Owen, in the Olympics? I mean, have you been watching the Milan Olympics? Um, I must say I like the figure skating, but I haven't seen much of it this year. Um, but yeah, I do find it relaxing. For you, who is are the worst leaders? It's a good question, Clara. Um, Unfortunately, right now, the three most powerful men in the world, Putin, Xi Jinping, Donald Trump, are all awful, in my opinion. Arguably, the most assertive is Xi Jinping. Putin is a tyrant and he's widely considered a tyrant and he's deeply unpopular in Europe. And I also think he's on his last run in Russia. I think that despite the facade, I do think Putin is facing his last, not last days, but certainly last years. Um, Trump has absolutely shaken up the West. He's shaking up America in a very bad way. He has divided NATO. So I think he's uniquely awful in terms of Western leaders. Xi Jinping is a dictator. Xi Jinping has a hell of a lot to answer for. I do blame the Chinese Communist Party largely for COVID because whilst they may not have created it, their decision to punish whistleblowers instead of containing the pandemic is has a lot to answer for. So yeah, I would say those three leaders are the worst. But of course, we get dictators in other parts of the world. So Putin and Xi are dictators, and Trump is a wannabe dictator. Best leaders at the moment, just to give a counter to that, there's inspiring leaders like Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine. I think among G7 leaders, I quite like Mark Carney. I think he has been standing up to Trump. Um, I don't know how popular he is in Canada, but so far I'm quite impressed by him. I think he's very sensible. I think he's got gravitas, so I'm quite impressed by Mark Carney of Canada. Um, Within Europe, Friedrich Merz has stood up to Trump. Starmer, I'm going to make a video on Starmer soon. Macron, I think Macron's smart, but I think he can be a little bit arrogant at times. And there's been examples of Macron kind of behaving like a king more than a president. But, you know, they're all better than Trump. Georgia Maloney is a Trump lackey. I think she's very, very close to Trump. I don't trust her. And the new Japanese Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, sort of models herself as a Japanese Margaret Thatcher, but she's still relatively new. She's already ruffled feathers in China. In the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., I think, is probably better than Duterte. But with a lot of Asian countries, there's a Generation Z anger over corruption, over the sense of, I think it's called Nepo baby privilege. That's something that Marcos needs to take very seriously. So, yeah. Let's see. For anyone wondering why I'm mentioning the Philippines, that's a country I've got connections to. So it's a country I focus on a lot as well outside of Europe. You reckon Trump could get impeached if he loses midterms? He could do, but unfortunately, it won't make any difference. He has been impeached twice. It didn't make any difference. So at this point, impeachment almost seems meaningless. I'd like to see Trump in jail, but unfortunately, he has presidential immunity. The only good thing from losing the midterms is it would be perhaps indicative of the Republicans lose in the next presidential election. I just really, really hope the Democrats get their act together. I'm hoping because most of the candidates are working class, we can outnumber the ex-Tories and push a new type of politics. This is the thing. If Reform really want to show themselves to be anti-establishment, they're going to have candidates who are more working class. And if you look at the top brass in Reform, Farage, Andrew Tice, and others, they're all millionaires. Now, I'm not saying being a millionaire is a problem in of itself, but I think it is when they pretend to be anti-establishment. Just a contradiction. Do you think assaults in public places should have significant more consequence to assaults outside of public places? Um, an assault is an assault. So, it could happen in a dark alley or a city centre during daytime. It's still an assault. So I wouldn't necessarily put a sentencing threshold on where the assault occurs. Yeah, I wouldn't put a threshold on that. To me, okay, I think you're giving an example. So this guy, let's call him Cresswell, saw his friend arguing with a guy on the street. He intervened and assaulted the man. Unfortunately, he was outside of primary school. Okay, I see where you're going. Yeah, so I guess children saw it, and that was a factor in his sentence. The thing is, I would imagine his defense team would argue that he was going to the assistance of his friend, as opposed to it just being a random assault on a stranger. I would imagine that would be mitigating circumstances without knowing the precise case. Um, I mean, put it this way: one thing judges factor in is mitigating and aggravating circumstances. Now, I got very angry with a case recently where two drunk women, I mentioned this in Birmingham, assaulted a man and his girlfriend. They almost cost a man his life. They got suspended sentences. Now, to me, that sort of assault is far more serious than, let's say, two guys don't like each other and they get into a fight. It's unfortunate and people shouldn't behave that way. But I think violence between people who know each other is almost, I'm tempted to say, is less serious than violence against strangers. I'm not talking about domestic violence, by the way, that's a very serious thing. But I think for it, let me give an example. Two guys who don't like each other get into a fist fight. They shouldn't do it. They should act like adults and just walk away from each other or something. But to me, that isn't as serious as a gang attacking someone or a violent mugging or something like that. So I would definitely differentiate on the context of the assault in that sense. Um, this case you cite, I imagine if the sentence was harsher, it was because it was outside a primary school and children saw. I don't know. I mean, what's the context? Do you know what the argument was about? Was it something to do with the school itself, or was that just a coincidence that was nearby? Okay, I'm definitely more of a summer sports person. Football and cricket are my top ones. More summer Olympics than winter, but if it's on, it's all fun. For me, I don't follow football and cricket. I do follow boxing a bit, but it's on and off. I mean, I don't follow it religiously. Um, Winter games, I like figure skating. I like most of the winter events except curling. I don't really see the appeal with curling. The summer events, I like gymnastics. I like running's okay, but I'm personally not good at it. So yeah. I do have one critique of the Olympics, so I think it's a bit too, there's too much of a financial burden on athletes. The sponsorship thing I think is controversial. I don't think that potential athletes should have a financial barrier. It should be purely on merit, i.e., if someone is fit enough, if they make the Olympic trials, and I don't think they should be restricted from a financial perspective. So I do have a bit of a concern about that. And we have a Philippine guest here, Clara. Welcome. I was talking about Marcos earlier. So most of my subscribers, you guys are in the UK. Clara's from the Philippines, so please welcome her. Um, let's see. Toxic LOL. What I'd say to the people disparaging the educated, who even cares what they say? Plus, we are all part of the Sapien kingdom. Yeah, that's very true. But I just see that happening. I think if you have a group of professionals, they will be targeted as elitists, whether it's fair or not. I could just see that being the case. Okay. Think it makes harder for him to give orders such as tariffs, I hope. That's true. It could weaken his presidential power. So that's one thing. It was catching the live. I gotta get ready for work tomorrow. Have good night. Good night, just common sense. Best wishes. Have a good week, and thank you for coming along. Do you follow anyone on YouTube? I follow quite a few channels actually. I may make a video specifically talking about that. Some of them are more, they're not so much individuals talking like myself. They tend to be more like countdown channels, like top 10 sort of things. I follow a few wrestling ones. I'm not a mega WWE fan, but I follow it on some level. Um, I recently started following one. Let me get this right. I think her channel is called Ghost Watching, and I like her delivery. She's very professional and she has some very interesting videos. But she doesn't show her own face. She just does these kind of documentaries. But I do like her approach. I may make a video 2016 clinical on channels I follow. That's a good subject I could probably bring up. Welcome. Thank you, 2016. We've got the Pinoy flag there. Appreciate it. Hi, Nathan. Have you ever watched Beavis and Butthead? Yeah, I'm a fan of Beavis and Butthead, actually. The thing about them, I've explained this to my friend, they're idiots. They're absolutely, they could be from another planet, but their stupidity is escapism, right? Because all the other characters in Beavis and Butthead are kind of normal characters on some level. I mean, you have Coach Buzzcut, you have Principal McVicker, and it's funny, the other kids all look, they're kind of drawn in a normal way. But the thing about Beavis and Butthead, are they friends? Are they brothers? I think they're friends. But I probably shouldn't embarrass myself here, but shut up, fat knocker. Yeah. Christmas time, I was watching. If you like Beavis and Butthead, let's see, Raya Rock. I recommend the Christmas special of I think it was 1995, a Butthead Christmas, something like that. It's very funny. It has Beavis as a reindeer and Butthead's reading out letters. I will say for anyone else, this is very much adult content. Beavis and Butthead are basically two American teenagers who are complete imbeciles, and they're always just they're slackers, and it was kind of made, I think, for the slacker generation, Generation X. It would be Marmite. It's not to everyone's taste, but for me, it's just escapism. It's pure escapism. Raya Rock. I don't know if you've seen the episode "Evolution Sucks." I do like the new Beavis and Butthead. I think it's very well drawn and without losing the character of the show. Welcome, Clara. Mike Judge ruined the reputation of Winger with the character Stuart. Yeah, that's the thing. There's another thing about it. Some of the videos they were reviewing actually gave those bands a little bit of attention they wouldn't have got. I mean, some of them really were obscure. I remember one called The Plant Man. I don't know if you recall this, but the plant man knows that the plants will grow. It was just really obscure indie 90s videos. And yeah, Mike Judge ruined the reputation of Winger with the character Stuart. Poor old Stuart. Did you see the one with the adult Stuart? That was incredible. Even as an adult, he was just the poor guy was absolutely being used by Beavis and Butthead. And it's almost like the way they look at Todd. You have Todd, Beavis and Butthead, and Stuart. And poor old Stuart takes it every time. Another one that really cracked me up was Beavis was crying. So yesterday you were crying. I was not. I was not crying, Butthead. Of course, Coach Buzzcut. You will beat up Beavis in your own time. No, you will beat up Butthead in your own time. Yeah. Anyway. If you don't know the show, you won't get the reference, so I won't spend too much time on that. But a few of you guys know what I'm talking about. I've seen Evolution Sucks. Okay, let's see. We're at 1 hour, 9 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up. Let's bring it up to 1:15. This has been a good live stream, so obviously advertising it is worthwhile. I'll do that from now on. I will advertise it in advance on the channel. Let's have maybe a couple more subjects. I hope you've all been able to have a voice to say something. I know the nature of comments isn't quite the same as writing out a long comment on a video, but I can't always get to all of those comments, so this is an alternative. Thanks for the show. You're very welcome, Owen, and thank you for coming by. Thank you for your time. This is basically the idea of a live stream. This is what it's about, so you're welcome to come to the next one. And if you ever do any yourself, I'll try and drop by. Toxic, for my birthday, I am planning to hopefully go to Japan. Not promising that. Well, I've never been, but it's also a country I'd like to visit. When is your birthday? And I assume you haven't been before. So, would you have any specific plan? Would it be Tokyo? Would you have anything in mind? Certainly a country I'd like to see one day. I love the hierarchy of Todd, Beavis and Butthead, Stuart. You know what would be good actually, Wales? I've just thought of something. If they could somehow loop it around and have Stuart in a position of authority over Todd in some fluke of the Beavis and Butthead universe, that would be very funny. Like, say, for instance, Stuart becomes a parole officer to Todd, something like that. I've just literally thought of that now. 18th of June, I guess, Tokyo. So we've plenty of time to prepare for it. Love your content, Patriot. Good night, guys. Thank you very much, Clinical. I appreciate that. Appreciate it very much. Hi, Nathan. What do you think of AI? Is this the future now? Okay, with AI, that's a good question. And it is, we were talking earlier about decades. Definitely, AI is one of the things that is becoming increasingly topical in the 2020s. Let me give you an example. I came across a video entitled Milan Winter Olympics Opening Ceremony. I watched it live on TV, but I wanted to see it again on YouTube because I thought it was very good. I thought they had some very good creative stuff. And almost immediately I knew this isn't it. This is like some AI invention. Now, I knew that because I saw the real thing, but some people might, it was quite well done. The problem is, it can be creative in its own right, but I think it can also ruin things for traditional creators. An example being there was a photography competition in Germany a few years ago, and with that, apparently the winner had AI generated content. Now, to me, that was unfair on conventional photographers. It was taking away their creative skills. So that's definitely a controversy with AI. I also have genuine concerns as to how it could be used in terms of identity theft. Because the thing is, if we look at content, some of it's obvious. Let's say it's a martial arts setup and you see two combatants fighting, and then one of their hands suddenly switches places in a distorted way. Or, like, let's say guy A is wearing blue, guy B is wearing red, and then suddenly red's on top of blue where blue should be on top of. There's little glitches with AI you could see. But if this technology keeps developing, it will improve. And that could potentially be dangerous, where we start to have a situation where if we don't recognize it anymore, to me, that's concerning. You see, at the moment, AI can have an interesting creative side, and it can sometimes be used in a creative way. I know during the Milan opening ceremony, there was some criticism that it was used for part of the event. I didn't really have a problem with that because it was a relatively short sequence. Why not? It's from CGI being used in film or special effects in the film industry. So I'm not completely opposed to AI, but I do think with any technology, we have to be very, very careful and remember, technology must not be allowed to replace humanity. On this subject, actually, I watched a Twilight Zone episode last night, and it showed this kind of utopian society whereby they were getting reports of kind of monsters on the outside of the city, attacking people, and the soldier character had to go out. He said goodbye to his wife, and he went out to help find this creature. Well, basically, it transpired in the end that they were robots; they weren't people, and they had built up this world themselves. It was a very interesting twist. I definitely have concerns about AI, depending how far it could be used. Chisun, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Tsundere. It's a popular Japanese character archetype, commonly in anime and manga, defined by a dual personality that shifts between Sun, harsh or aloof, and Dare, affectionate warm. Do you follow anime and manga, Toxic? Are you a big fan of that? Sorry, you asked the question. Speaking of Japan, have you known about their archetypes for anime characters? Like, I really don't know much about anime and manga, to be honest, so I can't say much about that. Obviously, other than Japan's famous for it. Okay, people, I'll give this another minute. So It's been a good live stream, so thank you all for your participation. Yeah, let's try one or two more comments. Thanks, Stephen. Pleasure. Have a good week, Wales. And yourself, Toxic, you too. Yeah, maybe we could wrap it up at this point, guys. Okay, thank you all for coming by. We've got 10 viewers at the moment. King of America, you've just come in. I'm just about to wrap up, but I'll just quickly address your question since you're here. Do you think there's a Donald Trump or Nigel Farage equivalent in Australia? Interesting. Um, Paula Hansen, maybe? I know she dressed in a burqa as a protest, but I'm not sure how much support she has, and I doubt she'll ever be Prime Minister of Australia. So I'm sure they have their equivalent. She would be the person that I immediately think of. Um, Actually, there was an Aboriginal activist who's been quite vocal. I think her name's Linda Thorpe. She made a protest during the King's state visit there. So whether she's kind of an Aboriginal equivalent of, well, equivalent of Trump would be the wrong, but it's an interesting question. But um, probably Paula Hansen, but I don't think. I mean, Australia right now has a Labour Party in government, so I don't know. I don't follow Australian politics close enough to know if that is the case. But certainly, there's been Trump equivalents across the world. In Argentina, we have Milu. In Brazil, Bolsonaro, and there's other examples. So next stream, I can talk about anime archetypes. Yeah, you can inform us about that, Toxic. I really know nothing about that. Okay, King of America. Having answered that question, I was going to wrap this up. So sorry you've come a bit late, but hopefully have at least addressed that question. Okay, everyone, I'm going to wrap this up. So thank you all for coming by. Have a good week. Until the next live stream, I'll probably do this about once a month. Thank you very much. Anyway, oyasumi nifin. Can I say arigato? Well, that's thank you, isn't it? By the way, Toxic, there was a Japanese guy performing in Sunderland recently, just Fender, or what you call them, independent, yeah, street artist. So that was that. Okay, Clara, thank you for coming by from the Philippines. Really appreciate it. Okay, everyone, have a good week. Until next time, goodbye.